to do? The liberal would try to control a black person through the concept of racism because they know that we are very proud, emotional people. So when I said I like Trump to like someone that's liberal, they'll say, oh, but he's racist. You think racism can control me? Oh, that don't stop me. That's an invisible wall.
I mean, it's such an explosive thing to talk about. But Amy, how does this play?
I just think we are back where we've always been in the discussion of two Americas and a polarized America, and that's really where a lot of this discussion, I agree with Josh, it didn't really spend a whole bunch of time talking about the issues that we thought were going to get raised. Kim Kardashian, his wife, of course, came in and actually talked about issues related to criminal justice reform. Instead, this becomes about which team are you on? Are you going to be on the red MAGA hat team, or are you going to be on the other team? And the entire Trump presidency has been basically about picking your side, picking your team, and for Kanye to put the red hat on, then he literally is saying, I'm going against my team, and there's a backlash to that in the same way that Republicans who have said, or people who were normally red going to the blue team, they get the criticism for doing that. There is nothing left. There is no middle. There's not going to be a middle, and this election is just going to, I think, further get us into these
Hey everybody, BushFighteR here, doing fake news with BushFighteR, and we're gonna have some fun. See what kind of trouble we can get into.
And that is this missing Saudi journalist, and how the Saudis are dealing with it, how the U.S. is dealing with it.
We're looking at it. We're looking at it very strongly. We'll be having a report out soon. We're working with Turkey. We're working with Saudi Arabia. What happened is a terrible thing, assuming that happened. I mean, maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised, but somehow I tend to doubt it.
I've talked to Senator Corker, Cardin, and a bunch of other people, Menendez. There'll be a bipartisan tsunami building against Saudi Arabia here if they did, in fact, do this.
It's very unlikely that he left alive, and it's time for the United States to actually lay down some consequences for the Saudis.
This is the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi, and the Washington Post is citing intelligence sources saying that there were intercepts showing that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman himself was the ordered this action. Josh, what about this, and do you think the U.S. is going to change dramatically its relationship with what has been an improving relationship with the kingdom?
That's not what the White House seems to want, and I've been struck by the president's passivity in not really calling out Saudi Arabia. He says he wants to wait till more facts become available, and this is like a lot of foreign policy issues. You see the president.
See what's going on here on Al Jazeera.
这么说呢？谢谢啊。哦，这里是做饭的地方。对对对。做饭的。啊，哦，这里啊。The rubbish pickers are facing another.
All right. CNN, oh, they're having a hoot.
But under President Obama, the only African-American president, it went from 12.7 to 7.8, almost a 5 percentage point drop. So if there's a discussion to be had about what Republicans or Democrats or African-Americans or white politicians are doing for black people, let's have it, but let's not have it on the basis of bogus information.
Gloria.
Well, I want to add to something that Don said and agree with him about the president using Kanye. He thinks the president thinks he's boosting his popularity with African Americans. We haven't seen that. And he thinks he's good for him. But he sat there and smiled the entire time. He was clearly uncomfortable. But when Kanye dropped the F-bomb and all the rest, he didn't do anything about it. He didn't say, stop, this is the Oval Office. We don't do that in the Oval Office. And this also happened on a day when you had thousands of people losing their homes
in
Florida.
Gloria.
And instead, the president is sitting and meeting with Kanye West because it makes him look good. I know they're supposed to discuss criminal justice reform, et cetera, but it was like watching a train wreck, because it was, and the president just sat there. I remember when presidents used to say, you know what, you need to put on your jacket to go into the Oval Office.
Andy Card used to say that.
Right, exactly. And so,
let me just jump in here. I'm sorry to hog this panel, but this has gotten me. So we need to stop putting people like Kanye West and Kim Kardashian. And again, no shade to Kim Kardashian. Kim Kardashian helped to get one person free. This is not some comprehensive overhaul of the criminal justice system. This president loves celebrities, and so that helped. But Kim Kardashian brought no experts in that I know of, no one who knows about criminal justice reform, no one who can overhaul the system, nothing. She sat there, another celebrity with another celebrity at another time in an former administration, we would have criticized this and said that he was disparaging the office. So let's not pretend. We should stop putting Kanye West and Kim Kardashian on the same plane as Jamal Khashoggi, who deserves much more coverage today than Kanye West, and the people who are down in Florida and in the Panhandle who are dealing with a devastating storm. We should be focusing on them instead of Kanye West in the Oval Office that nobody cares about, and he has no credence and no credibility in the black community on these issues.
We're going to focus on that right now. Guys, thank you very much. Don Lemon telling us how he really feels. And by the way, you can see his show later tonight. He'll elaborate 10 p.m. Eastern. That's going to be later tonight. I want to get back to the other breaking news we're following. More devastation from Hurricane Michael revealed by the hour as emergency crews struggle to reach areas ravaged by this record-breaking storm. At least 6 people are now confirmed dead. Let's go live to the epicenter of this disaster. That's Mexico Beach in the Panhandle. CNN's Miguel Marquez is there. Miguel, from what we've been seeing, there's not much left of Mexico Beach.
Well, Joe, I want to show you what is Mexico Beach today. We drove through the entire town today. What you are looking at, what 24 hours ago, 36 hours ago, was beachfront property here. Beautiful homes and businesses completely wiped away. There are parts of Mexico Beach that no longer exist at all. The drive-in here, utterly treacherous. Thousands and thousands of trees down, snapped in half, all in the same direction. It is something reminiscent of a nuclear blast that came through here. Just entire forests mowed down all the way down here. And emergency services just getting up and going in Mexico Beach right now. Florida Task Force 2 is here. Louisiana Task Force 2 is here. The urban search and rescue, they are going through home after home. There's 165 of them working pretty much 24 hours a day trying to get through here. They have found a lot of people who survived the storm here. And if you would allow me, I just want to name a few people who are okay. They want their families to know they are okay. They're all gathered in an area that we couldn't get a live shot out of earlier, so we're here now. But I want to read their names off. Robin Retzloff, her family's from Kalamazoo, Michigan. She's okay. Dawn Vickers and her entire family, they're okay. Robert Brock, he's okay. David Siebert, he wants his mother in Mobile, Alabama to know he's okay. Annette Cofield, she and her mother are okay as well. But there is just the amount of need and the disaster that is unfolding here is immense. There are so many people hanging out in town here waiting, hoping for a ride out of here at some point. Emergency services only able to deal with those who are actually injured, actually sick right now, that they have to get out on an emergent basis. Everyone else at this point will have to wait until they can do that. But people rode out this storm. Their homes are now completely gone. Entire neighborhoods. I mean, this is the sort of stuff we see everywhere. 80 to 90% of this town is majorly affected. A large portion of it is completely gone, and it will be a long time in rebuilding here in Mexico Beach, Florida. Just enormous damage. What you're looking at now is across 98. 98 is the main drag that goes along Mexico Beach. There are giant chunks of 98 that are now gone as well, completely washed away. There is literally nothing left. It's almost impossible to traverse this town very quickly because there are so many dangers on the roadways in the town, and in some cases, literally the roadway has just completely disappeared into the ocean. I mean, what you were looking at, that was once a thriving community, and it is completely flat. It is completely gone, and entire areas are like that near town. We were up near the public beach here a little while ago, and that is exactly the same way. All of those apartment complexes and condominiums right by the pier are completely gone and washed up onto 98, boats and everything. It is just going to take a massive effort to get Mexico Beach back up and going. Joe?
I'm glad you got there, Miguel. I'm glad you shared those names. There are going to be some people who are going to be relieved, but God knows how many others are still waiting for the news. We're going to have much more on this story coming up. There's other important news we're following tonight. A U.S. official now tells CNN that the United States is working on the assumption that a missing Saudi journalist was murdered inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. The Republican chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee tells CNN there's no question, direct quote, no question in his mind that the Saudis were behind the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, a resident of the United States and a contributor to the Washington Post. This says CNN has learned about U.S. intercepts of discussions among Saudi officials that seem oh so incriminating. Our global affairs correspondent Elise Labott is joining us. Elise, you were all over the story of these intercepts.
That's right, Wolf. Well, U.S. has intercepts of Saudi officials in recent months talking about a plan to try and lure Jamal Khashoggi back to to Saudi Arabia, perhaps to detain him, perhaps to kill him. It's really unclear what the plans were, but certainly this is all very concerning in light of what might have happened to him at the consulate. And as our colleague Barbara Starr is reporting, U.S. officials do believe now the working assumption is that Jamal was killed in the embassy. And
I'll go over to Fox, see what's going on Fox for a minute here.
In the show, Bernie Sanders having a sway. So you can like him, but you can't vote for him. And it's sort of the opposite of what we saw from 2016 when a lot of people maybe didn't like Donald Trump, but they were happy to vote for him.
Interestingly, that's how Martha McSally is running in Arizona. She's saying Bernie Sanders, Nancy Pelosi, all those names. So does the Kavanaugh effect last 26 days? For the Republican side, that they've seen some change over the past 2 weeks?
In the Senate side, I think it absolutely does, because it nationalized these races. These red state Democrats were trying to make this about local issues, health care to a large extent. Now it's all about the national divide between red and blue, and it's about Kavanaugh. And in most of these red states, Kavanaugh has very, very strong approval ratings, and it's a galvanizing force in the closing weeks.
The suburban House districts,
it's a totally different the opposite. Story. And in a district where you need to get women or independent women voters, I think this actually hurt those candidates, hurt Republican candidates.
All right, last word, Molly.
Well, I do think it's interesting that people think that it might not last for Republican voters. These are the same voters who managed to take their concern about the Supreme Court and have it last for 6-8 months to vote for Donald Trump in 2016.
When
I think they clearly care a great deal about the Supreme Court, so I think they will have that energy. We were being told it was going to be a blue wave and that everything was going to turn. The fact that this close to Election Day we're seeing quite a few shakeups in these races is interesting.
We don't know what the wave or what any wave is going to be, but we'll follow it here. Thank you, panel. We apologize earlier. We know Florida Democratic gubernatorial candidate Andrew Gillum is the mayor of Tallahassee. Doug McElway mistakenly said that he was the mayor of Tampa. Sorry about that. We're going to hopefully see the mayor soon down in Florida. When we come back, no rest for the hurricane weary.
Why is Old Dominion #1 in customer satisfaction? Maybe it's OD's over 99% on-time rate, or our decades of supply chain experience that support the dynamic digital marketplace, or because when we promise something, we keep our promise. The reason OD is #1 in customer satisfaction is our people who never stop
so much
to make
for joining
your
us. How should the United States and allies like Canada, for example, respond to the disappearance, the apparent murder of this Saudi journalist?
Good evening, Wolf. It's shocking. It's surprising. It's tragic. I believe it's true. We don't know. Obviously, we don't have the firm evidence, but signs point to it. It's difficult to respond. The Saudis are going their own way in a lot of respects. The political space in Saudi Arabia is shrinking. The reform program covers a lot of positives, but on the political space, it's shrinking, and this is taking it into a darker turn. How you respond is something I think that all the governments have to consider what their best options will be. Sanctions has been discussed, I heard earlier in the program. I'm not sure they would be overly effective in dealing with this particular case, but again, it's the sort of thing we've seen dissidents before. We've seen arrests before of people who are vocal on the political space, and the Saudis are going their own way on this, and so it's hard to say what would be effective in changing track. They want to close that political space for Saudis.
I want to point out to our viewers, Mr. Ambassador, it wasn't that long ago the Saudis kicked you out of Saudi Arabia. You were, for what, 3 years, the career diplomat. Yeah. You served as the Canadian ambassador to Saudi Arabia. They were angry. Apparently the Crown Prince was angry about a tweet from your foreign ministry about some human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia, and then they didn't only kick you out, but they did a lot of other things, including punishing Canada, removing Canadian Saudi students from Canada, among other things.
That's right. That's right. It was this past August. It was a tweet. It was a serious overreaction on the part of the Saudis. If they were concerned about it, the normal course of events would be to call the ambassador in and have some discussions about it and perhaps lodge a formal complaint. To react like they did over a tweet, I think is reflective of the kind of impulsiveness we're seeing out of the regime at this point. And this incident with Jamal Khashoggi is again another, I think, illustration of how sensitive they are to certain criticisms, whether it's via governments, via a tweet, or by journalists. It's unusual. They've had dissidents writing about Saudi Arabia for decades, and to take this kind of action against Jamal Khashoggi as a result of writings that he had is again, it's a serious overreaction, much more serious obviously than what happened with me and what happened with us. But certainly they've tried to punish Canada because of a tweet, perhaps as an example to others. This is what happens if you criticize us openly, because I think everyone agrees it was a serious overreaction.
Well, what do you think of the Crown Prince, the young Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman? Do you believe he would be the one who would order, if in fact these reports are true, the execution of this Saudi journalist?
It's hard to say. The Saudi decision-making processes are very, very opaque. That being said, it's hard to see anything really that's happening in Saudi Arabia these days, from even minor things to obviously to very large things like this would be, that is not going through the royal court. Whether it's the Crown Prince himself or the people around him, it's hard to say. And again, trying to track how that decision-making process works in Saudi Arabia is difficult. But a lot of things are virtually everything is being funneled through the royal court these days.
What do you think of President Trump's decision, his announcement that no matter what happens, no matter what the conclusion of the U.S. investigation, the United States will continue selling lots of weapons to Saudi Arabia?
I'm no longer a Canadian diplomat, but I am a bit reluctant to comment on what American policies should or shouldn't be. I'm sure a lot of people will be upset that they're putting, that the president is putting jobs and arms sales and money ahead of principle here. But again, it's not for me to say.
What kind of relationship does Saudi Arabia have with Canada right now?
It's a very difficult one. We didn't have a very in-depth and detailed, very deep relationship beforehand, which I think was part of the problem. But certainly right now it's on ice. I've been a bit out of the loop for the past couple of weeks since I retired. But it's going to be hard to build back up for sure. It's they're angry. They've taken a lot of steps. They've drawn a line in the sand on the tweet. Again, overreacting, but nonetheless, that's what it is. And it will be difficult to patch back up. They've done it with other countries that have had problems with them. Germany and Sweden, for example, both had issues with Saudi Arabia. Those relationships were built back up, but it takes time and it's going to take a lot of effort.
Dennis Horak, the former Canadian ambassador to Saudi Arabia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. Aaron Burnett out front starts right now.
Up front next, wiped out. Hurricane Michael taking out entire towns, and at least 6 people are dead, including a child tonight. The powerful storm leaving much of the Panhandle looking like a war zone. Plus, a U.S. official saying the working assumption.
Let's walk back over to Fox. Oh, they're back on the Kanye thing.
It's habilitation, not rehabilitation, because they didn't have the abilities in the first place. It's more important than any specific deal, anything that we bring jobs into America, and that we provide a transition with mental health and the American education curriculum. There's a lot of things affecting our mental health that makes us do crazy things, that puts us back into that trap door called the 13th Amendment. What I need Saturday Night Live to improve on, or what I need the liberals to improve on, is if he don't look good, we don't look good. This is our president. He has to be the freshest, the flyest planes, the best factories, and we have to make our core be empowered. We have to bring jobs into America, because our best export is entertainment and ideas. But when we make everything in China and not in America, then we're cheating on our country. And we're putting people in positions to have to do illegal things to end up in the cheapest factory ever, the prison system. I think that with blacks and African Americans, we really get caught up in the idea of racism over the idea of industry.
No,
as black people, we have to take responsibility for what we're doing. We kill each other more than police officers. And that's not saying that the police officer is not an issue, because they are in a position of power. But sometimes they're in placement of law enforcement. They need to be law power. It's force versus power. We feel that stop and frisk does not help the relationships in the city. And everyone that knew I was coming here said, ask about stop and frisk. That's the number one thing that we're having this conversation about. Another thing is opening up industries, and we've got to get some tax breaks. We're going to need to get a few breaks to be able to have some places in my hometown of Chicago and the 2.7 million to the 9 million surrounding suburbs where we can create some factories. We need to put curriculums from people who really came from the streets, not people who are just trying to set us up to go into a work system or prison system that applies to what people are really going through. Illegal guns is the problem, not legal guns. We have the right to bear arms. Right now, we're here together, and the greatest value that people have are other people. And we need to stop working on red and blue. It's like a gang again.
I think it's a shame what's happening in Chicago. They have to do something, and I am totally open. If we can do it a different way, Kanye, I'm totally open. But they have to do, I mean, we all agree they have to do something. That's for sure.
Now something else. So here now, Geraldo Rivera, Fox News correspondent at large and author of The Geraldo Show, a memoir. Geraldo, good to see you tonight. What did you think of that today?
Chicago, I doubt it.
Well, I think that if you strip away it was an extraordinary rant.
Need to get rid of
but if you strip away his flamboyance and his kind of stream of consciousness, get down to the substance of it in terms of urban violence, trade imbalances, the need for prison reform. There was a lot of truth in what Kanye was saying. You know, he was the darling of the liberal left in 2005 when he said George W. Bush didn't care about black people because of the way he handled Hurricane Katrina. Now the left hates him because he is embracing the president and saying to black people, take a look at this guy substantively rather than automatically being always on the side of the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I think that when you peel it away and you look at some of, and that's why we broke down some of the things that specifically touched on policy in that montage. For one thing, he said he's raising questions about why it's assumed that black Americans will always be Democrats. And he's brought up this notion of welfare, as he sees it, as, you know, in some ways, you know, kind of a box to keep people in, and that it doesn't allow the kind of advancement that he talks about. He also talked about giving people a better economy and jobs, and they won't end up in what he called the cheapest factory there is, the prison system, which I thought was interesting.
Absolutely true. And, you know, I spoke with the president a couple of weeks ago and suggested he talk to Kanye, Jim Brown, the football great, and Tiger Woods, the golf great, all of whom have expressed the notion. So you got 2 out of 3 in there. You prompted this meeting. Right, maybe. But the only thing, the only beef I have with the meeting is maybe the timing was a little awkward with the stocks plunging and the hurricane ravages and the Saudi journalists getting carved up in Turkey. But there's always something. There's always something competing for center stage in terms of the public opinion. In terms of the substance of what Kanye said and the truth of the matter that the president does have maybe latent support among the minority community, Latinos and African Americans, I think that is worth exploring. And the president should reach out and to show people that his economic policies, Trump's economic policies, is a rising tide. It's lifting all boats. He made the point to me, the president, that minority unemployment, specifically African-American unemployment, is at historic lows. That's what Kanye is talking about. Maybe by pounding the Resolute desk and, you know, with the hat and hugging the president and all the rest of it, the overacting maybe gives us moments to pause, but I think that substantively speaking, that may have been the best half hour in the Oval Office in many weeks, Martha.
So we have a picture of the Trump family. I think Jared and Ivanka are in this picture with Kanye West and the president today in their hats. Let's put that one up first. It's coming. There we go. So that is an image that I think will be around for some time. But, you know, when I watched this, Geraldo, I remembered, you know, the pictures of Elvis Presley and Richard Nixon in the White House. And then I tried to look back and see what was discussed in there. And it was not like this, because it wasn't on TV. It was behind closed doors. But there was an aide of Richard Nixon's who was in the room. And it's fascinating to look at the parallels. Here's what happened in there. Presley indicated that he thought the Beatles had been a real force for anti-American spirit, and he said that they were promoting an anti-American theme. He also, in a very emotional manner, said that he was, quote, on your side to Richard Nixon. He also talked about the fact that he wanted to restore respect for the flag, which he felt was being lost in America. He then went on a bit of a ramble, talking about studying communist brainwashing and the drug culture for 10 years. This sounds very familiar. And how about this?
Manipulated by the enemy.
In a surprising, spontaneous gesture, he put his arm around the president and hugged him.
Was not lost by the soldiers on the
And hugging Richard Nixon, you know, he's kind of a, physically speaking, President Nixon was an awkward person. Elvis is notoriously shy, was notoriously shy. I always thought that meeting was because Elvis wanted to be an anti-drug fighter. He wanted to, you know, campaign and to get the scourge of drugs away from American popular culture and so forth. I think that presidents can be reality performers in a way that it goes beyond Celebrity Apprentice. I think that Donald Trump loved the show that Kanye West put on today. He had no idea when he ignited that fuse where it was going to burn, what Kanye West could say. I mean, I don't think you know, the MS and all the other things that were uttered were ever heard before in the Oval Office.
Yeah, you know, it always strikes me. I'm sorry, we have a little bit of delay. I didn't mean to step on you, but you know, it always strikes me the president allows this kind of moment that could easily go off the rails. It's very unchoreographed, and you know, brought in all the press to watch this moment, and you know, went a little off the rails. And you know, people differ on just how much they think that happened. But you know, it is interesting that he's willing to allow those kind of moments, as you say, to happen.
You can't embrace, as the mainstream media does, Taylor Swift's new political activism without also embracing Kanye West's political activism. They are very different performers. They kind of have switched sides since 2009 when Kanye notoriously interrupted her getting an award at the MTV video presentation for Best Female Performer. In that Kanye and Taylor was the quiet middle American, never got involved. Kanye was the left-wing guy. Now they've switched sides. Kanye now embracing the Republican president, Taylor Swift going the other way.
That's a really interesting point. Geraldo, thank you. Always great to talk to you. Thanks for being here tonight. So here now with more on this, Jeannie Borelli, Fox News contributor, and Richard Fowler, a nationally syndicated radio show host and a Fox News contributor. So in there today, Kanye sort of went at some issues that have, you know, long sort of been and baked in the cake, for lack of a better word. He said we get caught up in this idea of racism over industry. He said we kill each other more than police officers do, although he said there's absolutely an issue with police officers and power in inner cities. He said we need to stop working on red and blue. It's like a gang again. Richard, what'd you think?
Well, listen, I listened to this whole monologue a couple times, Martha, and the quote that I pulled that I thought was very interesting, and I wrote it down here, was, we don't have the reparations, but we have the 13th Amendment. And why that quote was interesting to me is because I think while he has embraced the Republican president, that quote says to me that he's unaligned with Republican Party ideals, because I don't see the Republican Party rushing to pass a reparations bill for African Americans anytime soon. And I also don't see the Republican Party being willing to change the 13th Amendment, because what he's talking about here in policy is changing the part of the 13th Amendment that says that if you commit a crime, you can be sort of put into slavery, which allows them to create prisons. We actually saw the opposite. When Jeff Sessions became the Attorney General, he actually said he rolled back an Obama regulation which allowed for the use of private prisons once again. So he agrees with the President of the United States and likes him, but his policy ideals are very starkly different from the President of the United States.
Janine?
Well, Martha, I think what President Trump said was very key, that he is totally open to any ideas to fix what's going on in Chicago. Failing public schools, high unemployment, high taxes, street gangs. And for President Trump, he is a disruptor in the political world. Kanye is a disruptor with the Democrats' monopoly on black voters. That is why you have Democrats like Maxine Waters saying that Kanye should shut up because he speaks out of turn. When you look at the policies that are helping Americans and helping black families, this is what the Democrats don't want black voters to understand.
I want to play a moment from Don Lemon last night that got some backlash from Herschel Walker. So let's play that moment first. I just want to get your reaction to this.
Do you think Trump is just using Kanye as a prop to win over black voters before the midterm?
My issue with Kanye West is quite simple. It's that anti-intellectualism simply isn't cool. Kanye West is what happens when Negroes don't read. And we have this now, and now Donald Trump is going to use it and pervert it, and he's going to have somebody who can stand with him and take pictures.
All right, Herschel Walker took offense to that. Let's put up what he said in this tweet. He said, I went to bed appalled over Don Lemon's despicable behavior, laughing at Tara Sotomayor and Bakari Sellers' awful remarks about Kanye's visit with President Trump. Richard, what do you think about that?
Listen, I take Kanye at his merits. Like I said, I watched the monologue 3 or 4 times. I pulled quotes from it. I think everybody deserves to be taken at their merits. And I'm glad Deneen brought up Chicago, because the president 2 days ago when he was talking to law enforcement said that stop and frisk was the way to solve the problems. Kanye adamantly disagrees with that. So once again, it shows that while Kanye likes this Republican president, he disagrees with this president's policies.
You are pointing out the things that they differed on, and I think those things were quite clear in there today. But there were also some, issues that he brought up that you're not addressing. For instance, why should black Americans feel that they have to be Democrats? And the suggestion that, the programs of the Great Society may have not worked well, and they continue to be Democrats' argument that African Americans should always vote Democrat. Deneen and then Richard.
Oh, go ahead, Deneen.
Yeah, well, that is the assumption. And look, this is why the Democrats hate Kanye West. They loved him before he supported President Trump. They don't want to talk about how black unemployment is at 6%, how the rollback in taxes and regulations are lifting all boats, and how there are more job opportunities in our country than there are people to fill them. These are some of the policies and initiatives that Democrats don't want to talk about, and that is why they are demonizing and criticizing Kanye West, because he supports President Trump.
Richard.
Well, I'm not a Democrat that has demonized or criticized Kanye West, number one. And number two, and more importantly, the Great Society policies, when they were created, they eliminated food insecurity. Food insecurity is currently up. There are a lot of kids that go to bed hungry every night. On top of that, they also eliminated food literacy. Also, what's up is infant mortality amongst African American children and babies. All these things, these statistics are through the roof, and we've got to work on fixing them. I think Kanye agrees with the president on that, and we've got to find policies that work to fix those. And if Republicans are willing to work with Democrats and work with the African American community to deal with infant mortality in the African American community and deal with the fact that black moms are dying at an alarming rate when they have babies, then I guarantee you that the African Americans will be willing to work with Republicans.
Deneen and Richard, thank you very much. Good to see both of you tonight. So breaking news on Pastor Brunson, held in Turkey. President Trump has been urging his release, and did a Saudi hit team arrive in Turkey to kill this man? A U.S. official says that it looks that way.
If this did happen, and it's increasingly likely that something bad happened to this man at the hands of the Saudi government, that shows contempt for us.
Contempt.
We're going to Mitsubishi. Interested in a test drive?
Yeah.
Introducing the 2019 Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross. If you like sculpted lines, you'll love its dynamic design. Now showing at a dealership near you.
Get up to $3,000 cash back or 0% APR on select Mitsubishi crossovers.
Insurance that won't replace the full value of your new car? You're better off throwing your money right into the harbor.
These guys are being too polite.
I'm gonna regret that.
With Liberty Mutual new car replacement, we'll replace the full value of your car.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Let's see what's going on in the on the CNN live stream.
Guest, Senator Lindsey Graham, who says there will, no matter what you're
to get around.
There's some that I'm still getting even close friends.
That's amazing.
Thanks, sir.
Worldwide. And get double rewards points on every stay. Book now at bestwestern.com.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had.
Let's try getting the goods on somebody else here. CBS live stream. The live stream filter of CBS. Atlanta. To RT.
Is America First policy.
All these questions are why the president is coming. If those that don't want to listen to him, they can leave.
The Turkish president expands what Ankara calls its anti-terror operation against Kurds in Syria, risking direct confrontation with U.S. forces. Plus, a Moscow neighborhood is left stunned after a model student kills his flatmate and posts the grisly details online before committing suicide. It's 2 o'clock here in Moscow, and you're watching RT International live from our studio with me, Nadira Tudor. Welcome to the program. The U.S. president has arrived in Switzerland for the pro-globalist economic forum in Davos. Many are surprised he's attending the event, where the U.S. president will promote his famous mantra, America First. Jacqueline Vuga now joins us live from Davos. So Donald Trump, he's arrived. What can we expect from his meetings, Jacqueline?
Well, that's really what the question is on everyone's lips, because before the wheels of Marine One even took off from D.C., everyone's been discussing what he's going to contribute to this World Economic Forum here in Davos. And meanwhile, a number of European political bigwigs have been sending out a message of Europe first. And while that's maybe not as nationalist of a theme as America First, it's also not a globalist one, which is the usual mantra of the forum here.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, my first message is that France is back. France is back at the core of Europe, because we will never have any French success without a European success.
If between our 27 member states we're not able to send a clear and united message to major powers such as China, India and the United States, if foreign policy is made on the national level, then we will fail.
Now, the White House has confirmed that Trump will be bringing with him his own signature brand of economic nationalism, and that we'll be hearing about that during his speech on Friday, and we'll most likely discuss it with other world leaders that he's meeting with over the next 2 days. And his transportation secretary, who arrived in Switzerland before him, didn't mince her words when she had a recommendation for those who didn't want to hear that message, what they could do instead.
America First is a continuation of the affirmation of American exceptionalism. I don't think, well, I think this, all these questions are why the president is coming. And again, I think Davos should feel very flattered that he has chosen this as a forum.
I hope.
And so, for those that don't want to listen to him, they can leave. This is part of what discourse and discussion is all about.
So it's not clear, and we'll have to wait and see how many people take her up on that suggestion and simply do not listen or leave the room when Trump comes to talk. And meanwhile, we've been seeing protests across the country against Trump's visit in Zurich, in Bern, and Geneva. And there are actually more planned today here in Davos, but it's unclear whether or not they'll be able to go forward, as earlier in the week, authorities did say that rallies wouldn't be possible due to the amount of snow. But if I'm honest, we haven't seen snow in the past couple days. It all happened before we actually arrived, before the forum started, and all of the streets are actually quite clear at this point.
Okay, Jacqueline, thanks for the update on that, and I'm sure you'll give us all the reactions that happen after those meetings and speeches. Thanks, Jacqueline Vuga in Davos. The Turkish president has announced a plan to extend his country's military operation against Kurdish forces in Syria, which Ankara calls terrorists. The fight will now move to positions held by US-backed Kurdish groups in the town of Manbij, and it's feared that could lead to direct confrontation with American troops.
The operation we've launched, named Olive Branch, to cleanse Afrin of terrorists, is successfully underway. Starting from Manbij, we will continue foiling the games which are being played along our borders, and we will cleanse our region completely of this trouble.
So here's a closer look at what's happening. This is the border between Turkey and Syria, and the areas in yellow are held by Kurdish militias. In the west, you can see the Afrin region, and that's where the Turkish assault began. And to the east of it, this bit in green, there are rebel groups. They're backed by Turkey and are now pushing towards Manbij. Here's a recap of how the operation has unfolded so far.
They are firing at us with tanks and warplanes. We did nothing to hurt them. We are protecting our land and they are bombing us.
We have to sleep here in the cellar because of the bombs. We are afraid to go out on the streets. What do they want from us? We are in our own land. They should stay in theirs.
No matter how many planes and missiles they send, this is our land and we will not leave it and do what Erdogan wants.
In response to the operation, several missiles hit the Turkish town of Kilis on Wednesday, killing 2 people and injuring a dozen more. A mosque and a residential building were damaged. Local officials say the rockets were fired from Afrin. RT's Paul Islier has more on the ongoing Turkish operation in Syria.
What we're hearing from the Turkish president is that he will now extend his military operation in northern Syria to include the town of Manbij. Now, once the Turkish military moves into Manbij, this could potentially put the Turkish army in direct conflict with forces belonging to a major Turkish NATO ally, namely the United States. Washington is known to have some 2,000 special forces on the ground in Syria, and while none of them are thought to be in the Afrin area, they are deployed amongst various Kurdish enclaves that include the town of Manbij. Now, Manbij is controlled by US-backed Kurdish Syrian fighters. At the same time, we are hearing from the Turkish president that more than 250 Syrian Kurds, as well as Islamic State fighters, have been killed by the Turkish army and allied forces in the past few days. These figures are being disputed by the Kurdish side, who's also accusing Ankara of civilian casualties. This despite the fact that we are hearing from Turkey that they are trying to avoid civilian deaths as far as possible. Now, the American President Donald Trump has called for and is urging a de-escalation and a limit in the military operation that Ankara is conducting in northern Syria. It is now the 6th day since the Turkish military moved across the border, and no doubt in the coming hours and days the situation on the ground will only intensify.
International Relations Professor Hussein Bakci told us Turkey and the US are on a collision course in Syria.
The talk between two presidents at the moment is not friendly, and Americans made certain, I would say, threat in political terms that Turkey should not extend the military operation. We have regional conflict on the one hand, but also an alliance conflict between two NATO countries. The American side was insisting on it that Turkey is not going to extend the operation. So this is somehow a warning by the Americans to the Turkish president. The confrontation between Turkey and the United States of America is getting more and more likely.
The conflict has already plenty of reaction around Europe, where several countries have large Turkish and Kurdish communities, and some demonstrations have turned violent. A Pakistani doctor who was the key to finding Osama bin Laden looks set to spend the rest of his life in jail. Pakistan's authorities have accused him of helping militants and arrested him soon after the US operation in May 2011. Two US presidents have promised to get him released, but it's now been 7 years. Murad Gazdiev has the story.
You can argue Dr. Shakil Afridi helped catch this century's most wanted man, the man who did this.
Let's go, guys. Let's go. Right here, right here. Stay right here. Let's go. Here it comes.
Osama bin Laden. You can also argue he was a traitor and a fraud. It all depends on where you're from.
The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda. Tonight, we give thanks to the countless intelligence and counterterrorism professionals who've worked tirelessly to achieve this outcome.
Gratitude, though, has its limits. Dr. Afridi set up a fake vaccination program in the area bin Laden was hiding in order to collect his family's DNA and give the CIA proof he was there. Clever. Shortly after bin Laden was eliminated, Dr. Afridi was arrested by Pakistani intelligence and sentenced to 33 years.
He was charged in 2011 for paying money to the militants of that Lashkar-e-Islam, and he was assisting in medical term that he was making some arrangement for their meeting in his hospital. I met him in 2012 in June, and he said that I am innocent and the charges, they are totally illegal.
Dr. Afridi was first accused of aiding local militants and then of murdering a patient, though how fair those charges are is debatable. Obama tried and failed to get him out. Donald Trump, well, Trump is Trump.
You think you could get that doctor out?
Yes, I do. I think I would get him out in 2 minutes. I would tell them, let him out, and I'm sure they'd let him out.
It didn't fly. It's even upset the Pakistanis a little, being threatened with blackmail. It's been almost 2 years since Trump made his boast, and nothing. The man who helped catch Osama bin Laden, the icon of terrorism, is rotting away in jail.
We believe Dr. Afridi has been unjustly imprisoned and have clearly communicated our position to Pakistan on Dr. Afridi's case, both in public and in private.
And the US, well, they bring it up once in a while. That's what gratitude is worth nowadays.
We spoke to former CIA officer Philip Giraldi, who doesn't see Washington making any real effort to to free the doctor.
I was an intelligence officer. When people are caught spying for another country, that country does not like to let them free. So it's actually something that Trump did not understand. If the Pakistanis enter into some kind of discussion and Trump feels that he can be generous or do something that will enable this man to get free, then he might do it. But I don't know what that would be. I don't know what the circumstances would be. They are already having serious discussions about the money that the United States gives to Pakistan. The United States has been suspending some of that money and not giving it to them. So the Pakistanis are not interested in doing any favors for Washington. I think that is very clear.
A student in Moscow has shared online the gruesome details of him murdering and raping his flatmate before committing suicide. The incident has left the Russian public stunned.
I think they did it, and unfortunately, I think that he's deceased.
CNN has confirmed that the U.S. has intercepts of Saudi officials discussing a plan to lure Khashoggi back from the U.S. where he lived to Saudi Arabia and detain him there. Taking him from the consulate is believed to have been the backup plan, though it is unclear if there was ever a plan or intention to kill him. U.S. officials say Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman would likely have had to approve of such a plan, but cautioned that he may not have known the specifics of the operation. Senator Lindsey Graham warned of, quote, a bipartisan tsunami if the Saudi government is proven responsible.
Behavior like this is unacceptable, violates every international norm. It can't be condoned, and the way we deal with Saudi Arabia will be a message to others.
The Saudi government vehemently denies any involvement. Turkish police say they have evidence otherwise. Their assessment is that Khashoggi was allegedly killed at the consulate. The New York Times citing Turkish officials who say his body was cut up into pieces with a bone saw and taken out. CCTV cameras captured Saudi government vehicles leaving the consulate less than 2 hours after Khashoggi entered, then driving to the consul general's compound. Turkish authorities have identified 15 Saudi men as persons of interest, several of them caught on camera arriving in Istanbul hours before Khashoggi disappeared. Saudi sources tell CNN that one of them is a former diplomat and intelligence officer, another a forensics expert. Khashoggi himself, his friends tell CNN, long feared what the Saudi government would do to him if he ever returned to his home country.
And he suspected they wanted to detain him when he went back?
He knew they will do something very bad to him, either put him in jail forever or kill him. So he had all these bad scenarios in his mind. That's why he had no plans to go back. He didn't trust promises. He didn't trust guarantees because it's worth nothing.
According to Khashoggi's friend, he was invited back to Saudi Arabia as recently as May, offered a position as an advisor to the royal family. Khashoggi, we are told, saw through that. He saw through it as a plot to lure him back to his home country, to imprison him, Kate, or worse.
Jim, thanks so much. Out front now, the senior senator from South Carolina, Republican Lindsey Graham. He sits on the Senate Armed Services and Judiciary Committee. Senator, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Can you give me your sense right now? Is Jamal Khashoggi dead, and did the Saudis kill him?
Well, with every passing day, it looks increasingly likely that he's dead. And the most logical explanation is that he went into the consulate, he never came out, and the Saudis had something to do with it. We'll know more in the coming days, but I've never been more concerned about his well-being than I am right now, and all the indicators point to Saudi Arabia, and if it turns out to be Saudi Arabia, as I've said before, there'll be all hell to pay.
What other signs are you looking for, if all signs are pointing there now?
Well, they need to account, Saudi Arabia does, for what happened in the consulate. He gave his phone to his fiancée about 1:15 in the afternoon, and she waited around to midnight and never came. I want to know who these 15 people from Saudi Arabia were that landed at the airport, went to the consulate. So you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to be concerned here. And if this is done at the hands of the Saudi government, If the Crown Prince was involved in this in any way, it will virtually destroy his ability to lead this country on the international stage.
I want to ask you, because you have warned that there would be hell to pay, was your words, for the Saudis if it was them.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That means all-out sanctions against those who engaged in this behavior, isolating the regime, treating it with the contempt they showed to us. I've been a very big supporter of Saudi Arabia. We have strategic interest aligned against Iran. They've helped us in the war on terror. They've been a good ally in many ways. But if this did occur, this would show contempt for the U.S.-Saudi relationship. They would take a guy like me for granted. They're testing our values. And if they, in fact, did this, I want every other country that we deal with to understand what would happen to you. Would hit them in the wallet, and everything, in my view, would be on the table.
What do you do then if the president doesn't follow through on what you're calling for in response? What do you do then?
Well, the Congress can act. We sent a letter in a bipartisan fashion to trigger the Global Magnitsky Act, which would allow sanctions against those involved. The president's been very good. I've got no reason to believe he will not act decisively. Whether or not we cut off military aid is something to consider, because we do have national security interests in Yemen and other places. But I'm very pleased with the way the president's handled this. All I can say is to Saudi Arabia, this is an affront to who we are as American people, and we will not let this stand. This violates every norm of international law, and this will not go unchallenged.
Look, from what I'm hearing from you is that your gut is telling you right now it is much more likely that the Saudis did this and that he is dead than not.
Yeah, more probable than not. I mean, with every passing day, it seems more likely. You know, all the evidence indicates that something bad happened to him in that consulate. I can't believe he wouldn't come out and say hello to his fiancée if he left a consulate.
Who is this guy? Why is he so damn important? That's sad and pathetic. The news the CNN's putting out isn't as good as the Russian news today. They're actually reporting shit. Granted, I'm sure they have their own political agenda too. But that's sad and pathetic. CNN fake news. They're right up. They're Russian news today is doing a better job than fake news. You got Russian news and fake news. Right here, and then there's the fake news, and then there's Russian news. Something else. Let's go and see what's going on Fox.
That nothing will happen regarding Roe versus Wade in the next 2 years, where Kavanaugh will have to vote, and if he votes, as people think he will, against Roe, that will be a real problem. Environment, other issues as well, but Roe will be something where I think people will come out of the woodwork to take her on if things go south on Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, Susan Collins. Let's listen to this from Jen Psaki on CNN on Sunday about Susan Collins and what she thinks is wrong with her.
That's political cowardice. That is somebody who is pretending to be a feminist, but that is fake feminism. And that's why I think that she's going to be defeated in 2020 if she decides to run again.
Tammy?
Well, you know, what real feminism is, of course, is creating a country where everyone can succeed, where women are treated equally, where due process matters, which women rely on as well, where there's a presumption of innocence that we all rely on for our sons and our daughters. That's the core of being an advocate for women. There's a reason why less than 15% of Americans identify as a feminist, because it's a false framework. That being said, I think Susan Rice should run. She's never run for office before. It would be a great chance to ask her about the lie of the YouTube video involving Benghazi. It would be a great chance to ask her in public more about the unmasking of Donald Trump's transitionary team from NSA material. It would be a really good chance for her to have to face the American people and answer questions in that regard. At the same time, I have to disagree with Richard. Susan Collins is one of the most popular politicians, one of the most popular senators in the country. When Obama won Maine by double digits, by about 18 to 20 points, I think, she won her race that year with 61% of the vote. So you've got a state that loves her, and when it comes to what her future is going to be in 2020, she can do whatever she wants.
She tested the waters about running for governor, and it was clear she was going to lose. And what sticks in the craw of people, not just feminists, is to say, well, something happened to Dr. Ford, but it wasn't Kavanaugh. Either you believed her or you didn't. She didn't. And that's okay, but most people who looked on with, I think, an open mind were inclined to believe that when she said it was 100% him, that it was.
Gotta go. Thank you very much, Richard. Good to see you. Tammy, always good to see you. Thank you very much. So coming up next, Michelle Obama comes out swinging at fellow Democrats. Laura Ingraham up here next. And if we told you these two actually agree?
When I put this hat on, it made me feel like Superman.
America's Choice 2018 is brought to you by America's biopharmaceutical companies. Go boldly.
Come with us to a new world, deeper than the ocean, as unfathomable as the universe. A world that doesn't exist outside you, but within you. Where breakthrough science is replacing chemotherapy with immunotherapy. Where we can now attack the causes of disease, not just the symptoms. Where medicines once produced for all are now designed to fit you. Today, 140,000 biopharmaceutical researchers go boldly to discover treatments and cures unimaginable 10 years ago, and are on the verge of more tomorrow.
Come on, Kanye. Gotta make that head look good. Everybody's on the commercial. Let's see RT.
And have highlighted Donald Trump's nuclear button row with the North Korean leader as an example of the possible dangers. And nuclear studies director Peter Kuznick thinks this modernization will increase the possibility of military conflict.
Our main fear is that they're going to carry out these modernization programs within the context of the modernization. Yes, the faster they do it, the sloppier it becomes, and the more dangerous it becomes. So we're concerned about nuclear safety. But even if there is no concern about nuclear safety, the fact that we have these new modernized weapons means that the threat of nuclear war increases and increases exponentially.
The Saudi Arabian beauty pageant has seen the competitors going the extra mile to make sure they win. But some people have got the hump over contestants cheating.
Bring it on!
It makes the head more inflated, so when the camel comes, it's like, oh, look at how big that head is. It has big lips. They are cheating everyone. A fine should be applied.
And that's our
Hey everybody, I'm back. Sorry about that. I forgot to turn the sound on. Let the dogs out. Get a beverage. We've got a kind of a relaxed environment around here. You get away with shit like that when you're the boss. Anyway, who's the boss? What we got going on here? Alrighty. Here we go. Let's look up, see who's doing what. Oh, here we go.
With the United States and Saudi Arabia.
It is an important relationship, but you know, the relationship has its roots in our dependence on Saudi Arabia for oil, and that dependence no longer exists. So we've got a bit more freedom to maneuver here with the kingdom. We're no longer the supplicant here. I think the kingdom is the supplicant. And so we don't have to give the monarchy our unconditional love. We can place conditions on a positive relationship with the United States.
And it looks like very likely those conditions are coming. Yes. General, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up front for us next, Kanye West. Talk about a turn. Kanye West makes an epic appearance in the Oval Office. Was he trying to sell the president on a new Air Force One, possibly designed by Apple?
The iPlane 1. It's a hydrogen-powered airplane, and this is what our president should be flying in.
I don't know about all that, Kanye.
Top critics everywhere are raving Colette is the best period movie in years.
You could write.
You've done something important. You should own up to it.
I thought that I could never break free. Well, you're wrong.
Keira Knightley's most memorable role since Atonement. Rolling Stone declares it dazzles the senses. Vanity Fair says Colette is a treat. And now it's a New York Times Critics pick.
May I present?
See what's going on here.
And holding his hand, actually, we flew into the post-hospital to the emergency room, and that's where they really, in a sense, saved my life.
Tonight, General Keane shares his own untold story. Back in 2010, he was sent to Afghanistan during the surge under President Obama. He made some very close personal relationships there with the people that we were fighting for. There's one story in particular that is so powerful for him. He has not shared it publicly until now.
I had been doing assessment for General Petraeus for 2 years in Iraq during the Iraqi surge. And he asked me to do much the same in Afghanistan when he was assigned there. What I really wanted to focus on in the beginning of the visit, which normally lasted a couple of weeks, were 2 units that were involved in the heaviest fighting we had ever undertaken in Afghanistan since the beginning of the war. The mission of the patrol was to take me and link up with 3 tribal chiefs who had been helping the Americans ever since we arrived in the valley, at somewhat risk to themselves. So they put me in the middle of the patrol, a double file, walking down each side of the road, dirt road. The platoon sergeant says, "Sir, make sure you put your foot in the footprint of the soldier in front of you, because just last week we lost a couple of soldiers on this very road due to IED and mines." So off we go, a couple of miles. We hook up with the tribal chiefs in the mud hut, which is used to store harvested grapes. This is a valley full of grapes and vineyards. 3 tribal chiefs inside, all carrying AK-47s. They had put a rug down. We sit down, and I started by asking them why. why are you willing to help the Americans and put yourself so much at risk to do so? One chief spoke, and he spoke throughout our session. He said, sir, it's about the future of our children, and the others nodded. He said, we have no life here under the Taliban. The Taliban tell us how to dress, they tell us how to eat, they tell us what to do, they tell us how to do it. They beat us, they beat our women, and we get blown up by their IEDs. And he said, Americans can help us get a future life. I took all of that in, and I said, well, Chief, the risk is really significant, you know, to all of you. And he came back and he said, well, they're watching us right now. And he said, we know what that risk is, but it's our children's future that we care about. And that's why we're doing it. So I said, I just want to thank you on behalf of the troops that are here, on behalf of General Petraeus, you know, for the sacrifice that you're making. And I said, is there anything that we can do to help you? And he said, well, yes, we need a school teacher. And he said, we need a dirt road to get to the perimeter road and make it easier to get our grapes out, and therefore it'll help us preserve them. And I looked at the battalion commander. I had a battalion commander with me. I had an interpreter. And I said, what about it? And he said, sir, it's in the system. I said, well, look, if it's not going to work, you call me no matter where I am. I came back a few months later insisting to go back to the same place because I wanted to see what the results were. So now, no foot patrol. We drive right down into the valley. I'm driving along the roads of the valley. There are Taliban, I've been told, have been cleared out entirely. And along the roads are people. They're walking up and down the streets. There's kids. I stop the vehicle. I get out of my vehicle, and I'm talking to the kids. And I had seen no children before, and no villagers. And they're waving at us because this is the American troops coming by. So we get up to the village, and the battalion commander meets me, and he says, okay, John, I got to prepare you for something. He said, the chief that you were talking to, he was killed about a week or so after you left. He was assassinated. And he said one of the other chiefs was blown up, and he lost part of his leg. He's going to be at the meeting. He's going to do the talking. So I sat down on the rug, now this time in a village and people all around, and we acknowledged the passing of the chief, praised him for his bravery, for his courage, for his determination to build a better life for his people. And, you know, we talked about the Taliban, and then they said, you know, sir, today is a big day. You know, so I got a little bit of an ego, and I figured it's because I'm there, you know. And he says to me, I said, okay, what's happening? And he said, sir, the teacher's coming today. So I said, oh my God, that is amazing. He said, that's real progress. So I said, what about the road? Did you get your road? And he held up 2 fingers. And I looked at the battalion commander. He said, sir, we opened up 2 roads for him. So, you know, I tell this story. I mean, it's full of emotion for me, as you can see, but I tell this story because it's a window into what is really going on in Afghanistan. The Taliban are fanatical tyrants who are oppressing their fellow Afghanis. And what the Americans and the Afghans did is they came in there, Americans willing to sacrifice everything that they care about in life, and I couldn't be more proud of them.
Why is this fight so important to you, General Jack Keane?
Well, because it was from there that the Al-Qaeda plotted and killed Americans, 3,000 plus. I was in the Pentagon on 9/11. I lost 85 teammates, went to scores of funerals. It became personal for me, and it's been personal ever since.
That is our story on this Thursday night. Let us know what you think. Tweet me at Martha McCallum using the hashtag #TheStory. We're going to see you right back here tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Tucker Carlson takes over now from Washington, D.C. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you then.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. There was an unexpected and kind of amazing moment at the White House today. Kanye West, the rapper, showed up in the Oval Office and proceeded to give what amounted to effectively a campaign speech while sitting directly across from the President of the United States and while pounding on the presidential desk. You've likely already seen pictures of what happened. It's everywhere. And the scene may have confused you. You might have concluded it was a publicity stunt staged by famous people in order to become more famous. You may have found yourself muttering about the debased and celebrity-centered focus of our public discourse these days. You may even have felt a little sad, knowing that the dignified country you grew up in is gone for good. You can be forgiven for reaching those conclusions, but they're not the whole story of what happened today. Believe it or not, Kanye West said some genuinely interesting things this afternoon, things we ought to be talking about in public, but are not. He'll probably destroy his career for saying them. He'll certainly be despised by many of his former friends. But before any of that happens, let's consider what he actually said. We'll go with the most offensive things first. Here they are.
You know, people expect that if you're black, you have to be Democrat. I've had conversations that basically said that welfare is the reason why a lot of black people end up being Democrat. They say, you know, first of all, it's a limit to amount of jobs. So the fathers lose the jobs and they say, we'll give you more money for having more kids in your home. I think it's the bravery that helps you beat this game called life. You know, they tried to scare me to not wear this hat, my own friends, but this hat, it gives me power in a way. You know, my dad and my mom separated, so I didn't have a lot of male energy in my home. You know, I love Hillary, I love everyone, right? But the campaign, I'm with her, just didn't make me feel as a guy that didn't get to see my dad all the time, like a guy that could play catch with his son.
She didn't make me feel like a guy who could play catch with his son. West didn't explain exactly what he meant by that, and yet at the very same time, he could not have put it more precisely or more poignantly. He grew up in a party whose policies have systematically destroyed the American family, especially in poor neighborhoods. I didn't have a lot of male energy in my home, West said with obvious sadness. Millions of American kids know exactly what he is talking about. The Democratic Party won't acknowledge these kids or their loss. To party leaders, fathers in the home are at best irrelevant. At worst, they're an impediment to political power. Married women tend to vote Republican, and they know that. When prominent Democrats attack the patriarchy, what they're attacking is fathers. When they wage war on toxic masculinity, what they're trying to suppress is masculinity itself. Everybody knows this. Few are brave enough to say it out loud. West essentially did, and then he kept going. Watch this.
So, and that's a move, one of the moves that I love that liberals try to do. The liberal would try to control a black person through the concept of racism because they know that we are very proud, emotional people. So when I said I like Trump to like someone that's liberal, they'll say, oh, but he's racist. You think racism can control me? Oh, that don't stop me. That's an invisible wall.
You think racism can control me? It's an invisible wall. The reporters looking on seemed stunned, even betrayed. And then just to rub it in, West went on to defend the Bill of Rights. Watch.
What about gun violence with all the debate about the Second Amendment going on?
The problem is illegal guns. Illegal guns is the problem, not legal guns. We have the right to bear arms.
What do we make of all of this? Well, obviously, just from watching, you can tell that Kanye West is an eccentric guy. He meanders. He talks like someone who's never had to filter his thoughts, which he probably never has had to do. But much like someone else who comes to mind, West may be precisely crazy enough to think for himself. And that's a valuable quality right now. No consultant advised him to say any of that. Clearly, nobody controls him. Sometimes he doesn't control himself. But listen carefully to what he said. Sprinkled throughout his ramblings are flashes of truth. Real insights into the way the world actually is, rather than the way they tell us it is. Nobody else is allowed to talk this way. Go ahead and try it at work. You'll get fired. West doesn't care, and that makes him dangerous to a system that is based almost entirely on piety and lying. If you're benefiting from a system like that, Kanye West must be crushed. Here's the math of it. The Democratic presidential
honestly, there's not a whole lot of not a whole lot of news going on, so I'll go back to Fox here.
Over. So that can't happen. Kanye West must be destroyed. And so the thought police swooped in almost immediately to arrest this disobedient artist and declare him incompetent.
Wow. Okay, I'm doing this for everybody who's watching us who turned their volume down. You can put it back up again. That
But
was
if you think you're
bonkers.
going to get a thoughtful play-by-play and political analysis, you're not, because that was an assault on our White House.
It was a combination of stream of consciousness. I felt like I was sitting in on a psychiatric visit and a commercial for Donald Trump.
What I saw was a minstrel show today. Him in front of all of these white people, mostly white people, embarrassing himself and embarrassing Americans, but mostly African Americans.
Yeah, shut up, Kanye. You're crazy. Keep in mind, this is coming from the same people who believe Hillary Clinton is entirely well, indeed a serious person. They're hoping this works, this crazy stuff, and that you believe them, and just in case you don't, they want to remind you that Kanye West is a race traitor, as Don Lemon just said, who has a low IQ. Here was CNN on Tuesday night.
Kanye West is what happens when Negroes don't read. And we have this now, and now Donald Trump is going to use it and pervert it, and he's going to have somebody who can stand with him and take pictures.
Kanye, because he's put on a MAGA hat and he's an attention whore like the president, he's all of a sudden now the model spokesperson. He's the token Negro of the Trump administration.
Got that? He can't read because he's the N-word. That's what the liberals on a liberal cable channel are now telling you. But they have no choice. They are terrified you will listen to what Kanye West is saying, and that's not allowed. Jason Nichols is a professor of African American Studies at the University of Maryland, someone who's followed Kanye West closely for years. He joins us tonight. So is it okay to say that you're the N-word and you can't read? Like, is that... I don't even...
Well, hold
is that
on,
allowed?
Tucker, he didn't say that he couldn't read. He said that he doesn't read.
Well, he's dumb. He's dumb because he's the N-word.
No,
and
he did not call him the N-word.
Yeah, he did.
He said Negro, which is different. It's an antiquated term, but it's not the N-word.
Look, if you said that if there was a meeting of black leaders with anybody and you said something like that, which I would never do because it's disgusting.
Sure hope not.
I never would.
Sure hope not.
But if you ever did say something like that, you'd lose your job so fast to make your head spin.
Well, again,
so, like, what is this? Is it okay? No, but hold on. You know exactly what's going on. Kanye West, like, I don't know anything about Kanye West. You do.
I do.
So I'm not an expert on the subject, but I know that you should be allowed to have an opinion that's different from the mob's opinion. The groupthink isn't mandated. No, truly. The mob on cable news. Like, it's okay to have a different view. It's all right if one guy disagrees. Okay.
Again,
and they use racial epithets and call him stupid and crazy? Like, what is this?
Well, number one, in terms of calling people stupid and crazy, that's something that the president has done several times to lots of African Americans.
Are we for that now?
So
I mean, no, but hold on. Like,
what has done the exact same thing.
But I thought we were against that. I mean, they're attacking him on the basis of his race because he's deviating from the group.
But Tucker, call it out from your president. Kanye West, you know, and
Kanye, what was the president have to do with it? I'm just saying, I'm watching Don Lemon, but hold on.
Don Lemon, you know, come on.
I don't know. It's a major case. Is that okay? I guess that's what, look, I don't think it's okay when anybody does it. I don't care what color or party.
I'll tell you this. My view on Kanye West is this. I have lots of sympathy and empathy for him. He and I actually have a lot in common. We both lost our mothers around the same time. I know how that's a stabilizing force in your family, and I think he does suffer from some mental illness as he was diagnosed with bipolar, even though he tried to undiagnose himself.
But I thought
a lot of his ramblings were incoherent.
Okay, they were
and
incoherent.
That's what people are pointing out.
Okay, but some, I agree, some were incoherent, but some were totally coherent.
Yeah,
he said, look, the Democratic Party's policies have wrecked the black family. That's true.
That's incorrect.
Right, okay, but we can argue. Look, there's a lot of social scientists. We can have a separate.
Sure.
But that's an actual position that people who study it for the course of their lifetimes believe. That's not a crazy perspective. A lot of people think that. I think that. I'm not crazy.
Yeah, no, you're not. But I think that.
So why is it over the line when he says that?
Well, I think a lot of people are also disappointed.
Why?
And I think they're disappointed because Kanye held certain positions early on in his career that he was almost like a folk hero in the African American community, particularly in the hip hop community.
When he called George W. Bush racist, but you're allowed to change your views. I've changed my views on almost everything because America's changed. So don't we want that? See, what this is not, I don't care about Kanye West, and I don't actually care about any political party. What I care about is the freedom to think for yourself and to tell the truth as you see it.
Yeah, and he has.
But why are we attacking him for that?
Well, no, I mean, we actually, you on this show every night, as you've said, I have the right to have an opinion upon people that voice their opinions.
I totally agree, but I'm just saying, and so we're attacking this guy as crazy and an N-word who can't read and stupid, and he's like a traitor to his race because he's got a view that's different from the majority. Like, that's a fascist position. Like, we should encourage people to think for themselves, shouldn't we?
No, we absolutely should, but what they're trying to say, and I think what Bakari Sellers meant by him not reading, not that he couldn't read, but that him not reading, is that he didn't have an understanding of some of the things that he talks about. He hasn't actually read and thought these things through.
Rather than rebut it and say, well, you know, here's the information I have that shows that welfare has not hurt the black family. It's actually strengthened it. Okay, show me the info. It's like, you're crazy, you're stupid, you're a traitor to your race. It's like, you can't have an honest conversation when people
even some of the things that he said, you know, when he talked about welfare today. He talked about, you know, things that hadn't been in place since 1990.
Well, he's not a policy expert, but like, I don't know. It's just this weird.
You don't get more money for having more children. That's been phased out. That was phased out with TANF by Bill Clinton, and he's still stating it, which means that he is not up on the issues that he's espousing.
There's one issue. You have a famous person who's not a policy expert, but like, he's thinking for himself, and that's not allowed.
But the president brings him in to talk policy. That's troubling.
Yeah, I guess.
Bring in some guys who actually know
he brought him in to illustrate how totally intolerant the left is, and he succeeded.
No, as I said, I love Kanye. I want him to actually get himself together. No?
Okay, we got to go. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Tucker.
Well, the rage against Kanye West wasn't simply on television, it was all over Twitter. Tariq Nasheed said this: Kanye West is exactly how people who benefit from the system of white supremacy like to see black men groveling, buck dancing. I can't even read that. It's such crap. And it's so mean, too, by the way. Someone else called Samuel Singawane added, quote, Kanye is that one black friend every white racist person talks. You know what? I'm going to stop reading this because it's too nasty and go right to our guest. Christopher Harris is Executive Director of Unhyphenated America. He joins us tonight. I just want to be clear, Mr. Harris, I've never met Kanye West. I never will. But I just think it's too mean to attack a guy just because he agrees with you on, like, that personal basis, that you're a traitor to your race. Like, who talks like that?
Well, the left talks like that, Tucker. I mean, you know, you look at Donna Brazile recently, just what she, you know, one of those nasty tweets, she tweeted out that Kanye West has set black folks back 155 years. I mean, isn't that amazing? One individual who has an opinion that's different from the black collective somehow is going to set black folks back into the slavery years. I guess they're expecting at any moment now plantations are just going to pop up all over America. But, you know, if that were to happen, it would be Democrats trying to put us back on the plantations that they own.
But does it help? I mean, does it help anybody, individuals or a large group of people, when you tell them you're not allowed to think for yourself, you have to take orders, and anyone who has a different thought should be punished? I mean, it's hard to succeed in life if you're not having independent thoughts, isn't it? Or maybe it's not.
Well, absolutely, and you know, the left is nothing if not hypocritical. I mean, let's jump out to Hollywood. Let's talk about Alyssa Milano. You know, a few months back, she talked about having a mental illness. What's the difference between Alyssa Milano and Kanye West? Well, one, I mean, you know, Alyssa Milano is a D-list actress, and Kanye is a musical genius and hip-hop superstar, but they both have a mental illness. So are we now, like, is it okay to attack people for having a mental illness if they hate Donald Trump? I mean, is that what it is?
I don't know.
Or
I mean, look, I'm not a shrink. I can't assess. He seems like an eccentric guy to me, so are half of my friends. I mean, but that's not the point. The point is, shouldn't you assess what people say on its own terms? If I make a claim and you attack my family, you're not really addressing the claim, are you?
Well, see, and that's what happens with the left all the time. They don't have any leg to stand on. What Kanye is talking about is the fact that, listen, regardless of the color of your skin, things are better for people in America. People of different ethnicities are more economically free today than they were.
Y'all have a good night, and we'll see you later.